All right. Hi, Renee. I'm so glad to see you here.
Thanks for having me. It's
Yes,
nice to see you.
we are very excited to have you on the Swift Galleries podcast. And Renee Bowen is a senior photographer out in LA. And she also is a coach, both a business coach and a life coach. So I would love to hear, as we're starting out, just tell me a little bit about how you got your start. I know you grew up in Louisiana
I
and then
did.
ended up in LA. And so I'm actually grew up in small town Georgia. So I know the small town South a little bit. And now I live in Minneapolis. So that's seems like it would have been a very big transition.
Yeah, absolutely. No, born and raised, very small town, like one traffic light kind of small
Yes.
town. You'd
Hmm.
if you don't catch that light, you never know you even made it. And so I just really, big family, and I love my family and I love where I'm from, but I think I kind of always felt this pull to a city. And so when I, told my mom I was up and moving to LA in 1995, she was like, okay, I've been waiting for this day since you were probably 7. And she and I are really close. So it was really tough, like raising my kids away from her, but I never intended to stay this long. Like I
Okay.
thought, I'll just go to LA. I'll go to New York. Like I had this sort of wanderlust, I was in my
Yeah.
20s. I wasn't tied down. It was the time to do it. I'd graduated college and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I got to LA and then I met my now husband, who I've been married to since 99. I met him in a bar
Awesome.
2 months later.
Yeah.
so so
He
then I
kept you
got stuck.
around.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. And then, so when did you decide to jump into photography?
So I always had this love of it. And my dad was always playing around with photography, and he's a photographer, dark room in the bathroom kind of thing as a kid. But I never really thought like I could make a career out of that. I
Okay.
mean, I just never really, I guess I didn't have mentors who encouraged it either. Like, so when
Hmm.
I went to college, it was just a given that I was going to go to college. And it was just like, well,
Yeah.
that's what you're going to do. Cause like I was the first of my parents to go to college, you know what I mean? Like in
Okay.
my family. And so okay, what am I going to do? And I think I changed my major probably 5 or 6 times. I started as an art major and
Yeah.
interior design, and I was dancing around the art, right? But I
Yes.
had this like love of psychology. I had taken some classes in high school that I
Uh-huh.
loved. And I thought, okay, that's what I really want to do. So I ended up with a bachelor's in psychology and,
Awesome.
intended to go back for a master's and things like that. So getting into photography for real didn't happen until I had my first child, who is now
Okay.
almost 24. And my father-in-law he wasn't a photographer, but he was really big into photos. And he gave us this, just starter camera, right? And I
Yep.
had film cameras, but this was like a digital camera.
Yes.
And so that kind of like sparked my interest. It wasn't like pro level, but it was one of those, okay, this is fun. And then I
Hmm.
started taking photos of my own kids and had more kids. And my husband's an actor. So I was doing headshots on film for him just because, I was free.
Yes.
you know, and a photographer married to an actor, it's kind of a dream for an actor. And so, I was doing that anyway. And then when my kids were really little, I decided, I needed to work. We had this
Hmm.
kind of very, you know, unpredictable life at that point. He's a
Okay.
working actor, but he's an actor. And it's LA, and
Yes.
we had 3 kids under the age of 2, and because I had twins.
Oh,
And
that's a lot.
yeah, and I was like, I wanna be home for them. I'd like to raise my kids if I can, but I'd like to do it on my terms. So that's when I started my business. That's when I started
Okay.
shooting for other people, charging, doing families, some events, things like that. I kinda stumbled into it, like a lot of
Yes.
us do, not knowing what the heck a business was gonna be like.
Yes.
And boy, did I learn.
Yes. And I love what you said. I was reading on your website and you said it drives you insane when the term mom tog is thrown around like it's an insult. And I love that because I have this firm belief that every one of us has this like creative spark and we all get there different ways, especially if we're
Mhm.
going to do it as a business. And so, so many of us have started either photographing our kids or just finding a camera and realizing there's something you can do beautiful with that. And so I like really love that you said that, because, you know, you are like a successful photographer, you're a business coach, and you didn't have any formal instruction, and all of that doesn't matter. It matters how
Mm-mm.
you run your business, how you treat your clients. So
Yeah,
I just,
absolutely. I'm really big on that because I see
yes.
it a lot, I see it a
Mhm.
lot, and that it lends to a lot of imposter syndrome for a lot
Yes.
of, especially women, which I
Mhm.
mean, the term imposter syndrome basically came from, marginalized and women in
Yes.
general. And
Yeah.
so it's easy for us to fall into that, especially if we don't have formal training, we kind of fall into it, like you said. And that doesn't that doesn't discount anything. Like if you want to run a business, you can absolutely run a business.
Yes.
That's why I'm super passionate about working with women, especially in that
Yes.
space. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, tell me a little bit about, because I see that a lot too. And, you know, I experience it as much as
Yeah,
I like to think, oh, I can do this or I'll be fine. I still find myself doubting who I am. And so I'd
sure.
love to hear a little more like, what are some of the biggest doubts or fears that you have seen in women, especially as they're beginning to grow their business?
Well, I think that we're definitely, like we kind of touched on a minute ago, as
Mhm.
artists with this creative soul. I
Yeah.
think all creatives tend to fall into a little bit of that at some point or the other, because art is so subjective
Mhm.
and so many of us have this perfectionist mentality for
Yes.
one reason or another. It doesn't really matter where it comes from, it's there. And so I think probably one of the biggest things that I see is that, like, if I don't do it perfect, I can't do it. And also the worthiness, when it comes to,
Mm.
most of us don't really even probably recognize that we have issues with money or money blocks or worthiness,
Yep.
and how that's all tied together until we start putting together pricing and starting asking people for
Mhm.
money and
Yep.
charging for our art, which is, subjective and easily judged and whatever. And so that's when all kinds of stuff comes up, especially. So that's a really big one that I see is,
Yes.
why would I, like, who am I to charge
Mm.
this? You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you know, all I know for me, I like see all my past mistakes and I see where I started. And I'm like, oh, I'm just this. I sometimes
Mhm.
feel like I'm this same like little girl who's just like, oh, I'm going to go start my business. And I feel silly. And it's hard for me to recognize that like my work has value and that for me to
Mhm.
continue growing my business, I can't do good work and I can't serve other people if I'm not taking care of myself.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
Yes.
another really big one that I see,
Okay.
especially with female entrepreneurs,
Yes. Very
and
common.
photographers is, we tend to put ourselves last. It's usually because we were either taught that either, and we don't have to be taught that with words, right? We don't have to
Yes.
have someone telling us, oh, you have to put yourself last because that's what women do. No,
Yeah.
it's generational and it's done by example.
Mhm.
And I really think that, and I'm happy to see that a lot of that is shifting,
It
and I
is.
see it with my generation, the millennials, and then now my daughter, Gen Z, they're breaking it. And I
Mhm.
love that they're doing that. And, we're all facilitating it. And I think that the more we all do it collectively, the better it will be for all of us in the long run, because it's true, we tend to just fall back into I really think it's tied, honestly, to a very kind of underlying passive aggressive codependency that
Okay.
keeps
Yeah.
getting passed down.
Yeah.
It's like the same side of the coin that, and it, you wouldn't think that on the outside, because you're like,
Mhm.
oh, but I'm sacrificing everything for my kids. And, I want
Yep.
to put everyone first. And for why? You know what I mean? Like, why are
Yes.
you doing that? It's because you need something. You want something, right? And so
Yes.
I do think that a lot of us have that little underlying, and I'm calling myself out for that. Like, I mean, I've
Yeah.
definitely fallen into that myself. So I think it's something to recognize and definitely take notice of, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for you, because I'd love to hear more about how we can sort of start changing this mindset, but I'd love to hear for you because, right, you know, you've got your bachelor's in psychology. so much about this. So, but I'm sure you didn't just come in to your business being completely like, oh, I'm amazing, I'm going to charge so much. So can you tell me a little
No.
bit about how you kind of grew into that part of yourself?
Yeah. So I definitely knew I was kind of like dabbling, like I said, with families and
Uh-huh.
some events, and that was great, but I didn't feel lit up by it,
Okay. Yeah.
and I felt like, oh, this is great. I can make a living at it. But, you know, I really believe like if I just wanted to make money, I would have just gone to get a 9 to 5 and,
Yeah.
like fallen into that. But if I'm going to do something on my own terms, I want to do something that's really going to light me up. So what is that going to be? And at the time in my area, because I live in the suburbs of LA, no one
Okay.
was shooting seniors the way that
Yeah.
I wanted to shoot and that I had friends shooting in all
Mhm.
these other different parts of the country. It's like, that's really silly. Like we have year round perfect weather.
Yeah.
Why is this not happening here? And when I was studying psychology, I originally wanted to work with teens. Like I've always felt called to work with
Yeah.
adolescents. Even when my kids were really young, people
Mhm.
would say, oh, just wait till they're teenagers. I'm like, I can't wait until they're teenagers. Like, and
Yes.
honestly, that time was probably one of my favorite time periods with my
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
There's just something about adolescence that I think is, I don't know, I've just felt called to work with them.
Yes.
So I decided to dive into that. And that's when I really took myself seriously, took my business seriously,
Mm.
and I failed a lot. I fell into it. It was the early days of Facebook where it was just, let's be honest, super easy to market. Like all you had
Yes.
to do
Yeah.
is post a few photos and it's like 2007, it would just take off, right? You didn't have to
Yeah.
do a lot. And
Yeah.
especially with our millennial senior clients, they wanted to share the heck out of those images. And so
Mhm.
it was kind of easy. And then I started getting a lot of business really quickly and I was shooting a lot and I was burning out really fast because I
Yes.
wasn't charging enough. I had no idea how to run a business. I had always been told, this is one of those things I think that I just picked up along the way and believed, was that
Yeah.
you're just not good at math. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I kind of believed it. And when I started to really look at pricing and learning about the psychology of the pricing,
Yes.
I'm like, no, I'm actually really good at this. I was just really bad at algebra. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why did I believe that? Like, I really love business. Like, I think like marketing is like my love language, but I didn't know that until I had
Yeah.
to dive into it on my own. So I made a lot of mistakes. And back in those days, we didn't really have a lot of help as far as like really great mentors. And we didn't have YouTube. Like, it was just the
Oh,
beginning
yeah.
phases of it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like it is now. So you did have to figure out a lot of stuff on your own,
Mhm.
which is another reason why I love working with photographers in this way, is because I can save them a lot of time, basically.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it just kind of led me down this path. And I never thought that I would like teach people. Like it never was my
Mhm.
intention when I started doing this and fell into it. And I just absolutely loved working with seniors and I loved running a senior business. It wasn't on my radar that one day I would be a coach or any of that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was just, this
Mhm.
is what I'm doing now and I love it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until probably like 2013, 14, when people started asking me, how do you do that? How do you
Yes.
do that? And I was like, oh, I'll tell you, I'll, I'll,
Mhm.
I'll teach you.
Yeah.
And it just kind of grew from there. And so once I realized though, because I was mentoring for a while and, people would
Okay.
come out and mentor with me and I would
Yeah.
shoot with them and all that kind of stuff. What I really started to see is that what they really needed help with was their mindset. And
Yes. Absolutely.
I didn't realize that's what I was doing because I've always kind of been that way. Like I've always just been a psychologist to like all my friends and family.
Uh-huh.
It's just
Yeah.
like who I am. And so at one point, one of my friends told me, she's like, not everybody knows that. Like not everybody does that. And I was like, what do you mean? You know what I mean? Like when you're
Yep.
doing it naturally and you're just kind of good at something, you just think that everybody does it. But when you step back, you realize, no, they don't. And I realized how much I loved helping other people in that way. It was
Mhm.
like a different way for me to serve, you know what I mean? With a
Yes.
different kind of gift, basically. And I
Absolutely.
always tell photographers too, like what we do, especially as portrait photographers, right? And
Mhm.
separated from like fashion, especially. It's a psychology job. Like we have to work
Mhm.
with people. You have to be a people person and get them
Mhm.
out of their head, especially with seniors.
Yes.
And it was just this sort of natural evolution, I think, for me.
Mhm.
So I went back, got certified, I wanted to dive back into that and see, okay, how can I help best? And for
Yes.
me, I really believe that most of our limiting beliefs are in our unconscious mind. So I was like, okay, how can I work with that? How can I help
Yes.
people rewire that? Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. And it's interesting hearing you talk because I love teenagers too. They are like, teenagers are our future. And as time goes on, they're so brave. Like this generation is so brave. They speak their
Yep.
mind. But I love, because I watched your video on seniors on your website and how you are there getting to know them, but also encouraging them. And so I love that even this mindset stuff, you're working with photographers, but you're also working on
Yeah.
it with your senior clients to kind of bring up this generation. It makes me excited. It makes me so
Thank you.
excited to see where things are going
Yeah,
with you. So
it's really a big part of what I do. And, when we do these boutique businesses, when you're charging more and spending more time with your clients, it's a relationship based business. I mean,
yes,
people are going to come to you for who you are. And you can tie that directly to showing up for yourself and your brand. Like, what I mean? All of that stuff matters because your clients are attracted to what you put out. Like, what kind of beacon are you putting out is what I'm always kind of
yes,
talking to photographers about. So that relationship is really important. And yes, I tend to fall into a little bit of a coach role with some of my clients, especially my
yes.
team, because, I spend more time with like a smaller group of them because like mine for the
Yeah.
year, but it's amazing to see them go off now. And I'm still in touch with them and shooting their weddings. And I don't even shoot weddings, but I'll shoot theirs.
Yeah. That's
So
awesome. That's awesome.
yeah.
I love it. So I want to hear just a little more before we get into kind of how you help photographers with this mindset. We talked about how we have like money blocks. We've talked about mindset and just some of these underlying beliefs. I would love to hear a little more where you think these are coming from. And then maybe just even like when we're saying, in case someone hasn't heard, like, what do you mean
Yeah.
mindset? What do you mean underlying beliefs? If you can just explain that a little bit so we can
Yeah.
understand it a little better.
So mindset definitely gets thrown around a lot. I feel like I've always been, and it's probably just my background and love of psychology, but I've always been like drawn to that world of personal development. I was listening to
Yes.
Tony Robbins in like the early 2000s,
Okay.
on
Yeah.
DVD and CD in my little Walkman. I'm a little bit older, but yes, I've always been into self-development and personal development. And so I think that having that word thrown around a lot, what it really means to me is, you hear this a lot, get out of my own way. I just need to get out of my own way. I mean, if I had $1 for every time I heard a photographer tell me that, it comes down to what's really stopping me is me, right? I'm kind of self-sabotaging. They realize that, well, the pricing, like I said before, I'm triggered,
Yeah.
it triggers these other deeper workings of our unconscious mind. So I really believe that pretty much everything that is stopping us and halting us from growth is a dysregulated nervous system, first of all. And that's distinctly related to unconscious programming that we have just picked up.
Yeah.
So your unconscious mind, like, so you kind of have to think about it. We hear terms like lizard brain. If you've ever heard that, really means the oldest part of your brain. It's your deep limbic system.
Yeah.
And so kind of a brain nerd too. So I like talking about the
I love
actual,
it.
you know what I mean? Like kind of
Yes.
incorporating both. And I have a certification in something like that as well. So because I think it has to meld together for it to make sense for a lot of people, because it's not all stuff. It's a little bit of woo-woo stuff, but it's not,
Yes.
it
Also
doesn't have to be all of
science.
it. It's
Yeah.
science. And
Yeah.
so that old part of our brain is there for a reason. Like it has literally been around for, I mean, millions and millions of years. So its job is just to keep us safe. It's just to keep us alive. And it's where our anxieties live and where fears, really stem from. Because when we want to do something outside of that comfort zone, start a business, whatever that is, your unconscious programming, which is, it literally just pulls you back down. That's not safe. That's not safe.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? And that's where those thoughts, those limiting beliefs, I can't do this. Who am I to think that I can do this? I shouldn't be charging this much. That's all coming from that we just need to stay alive, and so it's
Yes.
up to us to regulate our nervous system and to look at it for what it is and
Mhm.
give it a name and not feel like we are stifled by it. So I always tell photographers, you kind of just have to do it scared, right? Because the fear is never really going to go completely away.
Yeah.
It's just how you're going to work with it and how you're going to regulate your nervous system so that you can
Mhm.
be okay working through it. Like, how bad do you want it? Kind of thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So there's all kind of ways you can work with it. Like, it's very individual, I find, especially even in small group coaching. Everybody's got a different trigger. Everyone is going to respond a little bit differently to a strategy. And
Mhm.
so that's why I think that's why I think coaching really works is,
Absolutely. Yes.
you know, it's not for a coach to do the work for you. We can do a lot in the terms of getting you to see and reframe and
Yes.
rewire, but it's already in there. It's just we're pulling it out, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. Can you give me like a one example of something that we or a photographer can do to help regulate our nervous system? Like, do you have an actual physical strategy
Lots of
that we could
things. Yeah.
do? Yeah.
There's probably lots of things. I mean, I like to give people a lot of different suggestions and then see what works for
Mhm.
them because again, everyone has a different way
Yes.
of, doing things. We hear a lot about meditation and there's a reason why we do. It's because it works.
Yes.
But most creatives have a really hard time meditating because we
Yes.
have that brain that never stops.
Mhm.
And, how many times do you hear people saying like just wake up in the middle of the night and your brain is just on?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is not good.
Mhm.
Why is it? So I think part of it is recognizing it. Like the first thing in anything is to not be like not live in a hypnotic state to it. Like
Yes.
see that it's happening, right?
Yes.
And noticing it, bringing it to the conscious level and saying, okay, that's interesting. Not judging it. That's the other thing because we
Yes.
tend to go to this self-hatred really quickly,
Yes.
so observing without judgment, like, oh, that's interesting that I do that. Like, I wonder what that's about. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And asking yourself the right questions. So that's a
Okay.
really big thing is
Yeah.
asking the right questions. They're going to lead you to the right answers.
Yeah.
So I talk about this a lot in coaching. I do a lot of journal prompts with the right questions. So journaling can be really,
Yeah.
impactful for a lot of people. If that's how you learn and process information, especially starting your day with good questions, like even just one or two can just set up your whole day
Yes.
how you want to do it. Like, where do you want to direct it as opposed to just letting, getting on your phone and letting it take you
Oh
away
man.
to wherever it's going to go. Right.
Yes.
So noticing that, and yeah, meditation is really impactful, but you have to find what works for you. I personally like hypnosis more than meditation. And
Yeah.
I am certified in hypnosis because it works directly with the unconscious mind. And you don't have to really do anything. You're just going to just lay there and listen
Yes.
to it and your unconscious will just soak it in. And so I think that can be a really powerful tool. Some of my clients love it. Like they just listen to
Yes.
my tracks on loop. And so that can
Okay.
be really helpful too. Yeah.
That is awesome. So I would love, this is a good segue into talking about the hypnosis. I used hypnosis for when I gave birth to my son.
Yes.
And so I hypno babies.
Yeah.
I'm
Same.
sure
Same.
yeah. And so it was one of those things. I didn't think I was the type of person to do hypnosis. And then, during my pregnancy, I was like, I feel like this is good for me. And it helped just even calm my anxieties during the
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy, because can be like especially for a first pregnancy, a very nerve-wracking time. Well, yeah, I would love to hear more about, because I have not seen hypnosis used like for mindset in the photography world. So I think
Yeah.
what you're doing is so interesting, and I think it can be so helpful. So I'd love to hear more about what
Yeah.
kind of what you do. And it sounds like you have hypnosis tracks that you
I
sell. Awesome.
do.
I'll check
So
those out.
yeah. So I'll tell you, there's a couple different ways you can, get into that. But I also did that with my son
You did.
24 years ago. Yeah,
Okay.
I was, back then it was kind of in its early stages. I don't even know if it was
Mhm.
called that yet, but it was definitely geared, toward mothers who wanted a natural childbirth,
Yeah.
which I did, and I did it. I think that was probably my first introduction to that world. and realizing
Okay.
how powerful our mind can be.
Mhm.
Because when it's done, and as I'm sure you know, I literally couldn't believe that I did that. Like I couldn't believe
Yes.
it. It was the
Yes.
most empowering. I felt like I could move a mountain the day after I
Yes.
gave birth. Like I literally the adrenaline alone and just the feeling of accomplishment, like it was something I never thought that I could do. And then once I went through it, I was like, I can't believe I didn't die. You know what I mean? Like it was
Yes.
just such
Yes.
a, it was,
It's
it's a trauma in a lot
amazing.
of ways. But
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
approach it in this way, you really do see how powerful it is to just step aside and let
Mhm.
your body and your brain just do the work, right? And so that
Yes.
was my first sort of introduction to it. And I kind of fell in love with it then, but I didn't really dive back into really learning about it until much later, as a practitioner myself.
Yes.
And when it was in 2019 is when I got certified for
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
And I realized, it was kind of in conjunction with getting certified in life coaching and NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming. And it was kind of all together because NLP does use a lot of hypnotic language, and basically what it is, it's sales, right? And so, I mean,
Okay.
if you've ever been marketed to, you've been NLP'd. And
I like that.
when you be,
NLP'd.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh, when you go through the training, you realize, oh, wow, you really start to see all these suggestions that you've been getting
Yes.
your whole life, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, a lot of people can use it for bad. You use it for good in the way that, I'm
Mhm.
taught and in coaching to elicit what you're going for, the
Yes.
response and the result. So the hypnosis, at first I was like, okay, this is really cool. I love it. I'll use it for sure.
Yes.
But at the time I was like, I'm not really sure how I'm going to use that like in my business, in my coaching and
Mhm.
things like that. But I found very quickly that there were people who really, photographers who in my programs, and I had a membership at the time, who really wanted that. And so I started creating
Yeah.
tracks specifically based on, you know, creatives, right?
Yeah.
And abundance. And so each one has a different sort of theme,
Okay.
abundance is a big theme. I have a few on that one,
Yes.
because there's different things you can work on, whether it's like a block or just feeling worthy. A
Mhm.
lot of this is tied to receiving and how well we receive compliments or receive anything
Yes.
in our life, and openness and
Mhm.
all of that stuff. And then just general happiness and anti-anxiety stuff. Like, as you said, it's just
Yes.
calming. You know what I mean? A
Uh-huh.
side effect of all of it is that you just are more relaxed and
Yes.
regulated. And so I started creating tracks, and I do have them included in some of my programs. Like, so in my higher level programs, if people come coach with me, they get access to all of that because I want them to use this as a tool if
Use
that is
them.
something that speaks
Mhm.
to them. And I do sell like single tracks on my coaching site. And then I just recently, I haven't formally announced it yet, but I decided to do a private podcast. I am starting a regular podcast. So
Okay.
that's been in the works for a
Awesome.
while, which will be a meld of it. It'll be geared more toward creatives and not specifically just photographers, but there will
Yes.
be certain episodes on for photographers.
Okay.
But the private podcast, I felt really kind of called to do because I felt like there needed to be a space for this mindset stuff, right?
Yes.
And so I call it Calibrate, and it's all about calibrating your nervous system. And
Yes.
so there are different episodes on different topics like imposter syndrome and analysis paralysis, overthinking, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And then I'll throw in my tracks of hypnosis as episodes every
That's
so often
awesome.
as
I
well.
love it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make it easier for people to access as well, because you can
Mhm.
just pop that into Apple Podcasts and listen to it on your phone,
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I think that's great. And so I know a lot of people don't understand hypnosis. So
Yeah.
they're just this like
Yeah.
idea, our thoughts of hypnosis, and mine before I did babies was someone sitting in a
Yeah.
chair,
Yeah.
putting a watch in front of your eyes. So can you talk a little bit about how that is, and like if you're
Mhm.
doing, because this is, and what we're talking about is self hypnosis. You're not working, no one's like in the room with you.
On the
And
tracks, yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah. And so when you're doing this hypnosis for yourself, what does it look like? I mean,
Mm.
and I know the way I did it, you're laying down, you're listening to something. So it's just this very like relaxing state. And you're not trying to get someone to do something silly. It's different than
Yeah,
that. So I would love to
yeah.
hear in your words, how would you describe it to someone who's like, what is hypnosis? What are you going to do to me?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people have that question, like, what are you going to do? Yeah, it's not like suggestive, stage hypnosis, although, people can do that. That's not what this is. And it's trance. It's basically going into a trance. And we go
Yeah,
into trances all the time,
we
by the
do.
way, on our
When we're
own.
driving.
When you're driving,
Yes.
especially for me, like when I go on a long walk and I put my headphones in and I listen to like my favorite music, that's a trance in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, right? And so when you get somewhere and realize, how did I get here? You've been in a trance. And so your body naturally wants to go in trance. It's a natural thing
Yes.
that we do. So it's not something that you're trying to do that is odd for you,
Yes.
your brain, right? So first of all, it's super, super natural and easy to do. And yeah, I can facilitate hypnosis one-on-one with someone, if I'm in person, if I wanted to, but it's really just about getting someone to relax using
Mhm.
hypnotic language, getting them into a trance so that their unconscious brain can do the work, can
Yes.
receive the information and do the work. And so there are some hypnotic suggestions that, like on the tracks, like you said, just to backtrack just a second.
Yes.
It is more like self-hypnosis in that way because you're listening to it. I kind of like to call it guided hypnosis because I'm
Guided
still there
hypnosis.
talking to
I
you.
like that. I like that. Yes.
Like I'm still doing it.
You're still
And all you
there.
have to do is plug in.
Mhm.
You don't have to come up with anything. And that's
Yes.
the main thing that I like to really reiterate for people is that you don't have to do anything. Like you literally just show up and you can be at rest if you want. I have these really cool sleep masks that has headphones built into it. So like, cause I like to listen to them as I'm falling asleep and
Yes.
kind of, cause it does get me super relaxed, but I
Mhm.
also like to listen to them in a bathtub, like hot bath,
Yep.
just relax for a few minutes, right? You can do it while you're editing as well. Like you
Yes.
don't
Oh,
have to
that's a
be at
great
rest,
idea. Yes.
so you can do it as long as you're not driving a car and
Yeah.
trying to you know, a lot of my clients who do them often and who listen to my tracks a lot, they like to do it while they're just cleaning the house and doing laundry or anything like that. Because again, you can let your brain, your thoughts just kind of take you where they're going to go.
Yes.
You're going to get it. Your unconscious mind is going to get it.
Mhm.
So I like to also record my tracks over binaural beats, and binaural beats are like
Okay.
a whole nother level of like brainwave science.
Yes.
And that I think helps get the hypnosis kind of like in there.
Yes.
It kind of hard
Oh,
to
that's,
explain, but
yeah.
yeah, it kind of gets it a little bit more wired. A friend of mine said that it's funny. So I gave some to my friend who had she travels a lot. She's a travel blogger. And she has kind of some anxiety on planes, because she's
Yeah.
on long flights.
Me too.
She says that she listens. She's like, I listen to you for 12 hours straight. She just puts them on loop. And I was like, oh my God.
How do you feel about that?
I was like, that's a lot. And she's like,
Yeah.
no, it's amazing. She's
Yeah.
like, I can't tell you like how relaxed I am. She's like, in general, I'm a happier person when I get off
Yeah.
that plane. I was like, oh,
I love
that's
it.
really interesting.
Yes.
So yeah, you can use it all kind of ways.
It's funny. You were talking about listening to it at sleep. So my husband, he sometimes when he can't sleep, he will put on the Hypno Babies
Yeah.
track.
Yeah.
And it's all about pregnancy and stuff. But even that, like, it doesn't matter because it's hilarious. And another example, I recently was reading about how just even when we have this, just to show how natural hypnosis is, there was an article about how, like, why do we come up with such great ideas in the shower? And it's because it can be that same thing where you've got like the noise of the shower, you don't have anything else distracting you, and it can absolutely do the same thing in the shower.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
We have to
maybe
set
that's a good
aside.
time to listen
Yeah.
to your
Yeah.
track.
You can put the
Yeah.
speaker on, but still it's really about allowing it in, right? Allowing
Yes.
those creative
let it.
downloads
Yeah.
to come in, because most of the time, and not just creatives, I think a lot of us can be guilty of, we just think, right? And so
Yes.
our thinking brain, our evolved brain, does a lot of thinking on the daily, and we tend to overthink ourselves into a lot of stuff that we probably just should just listen to,
Yes.
the core, our gut, and so I feel like that is definitely why those things happen. Like some people say, like, that's why you wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and get like an amazing idea, or like on a walk or on the shower. Your body also, there's a physicality I think, involved in that as well. So, there's science that does show us that when you move your body, it
Mhm.
helps, it helps all of
Absolutely.
those
Yes.
processes. And so when you combine some of those together, it can be really interesting as well. So I like to
Yes.
listen to I will listen to hypnosis tracks when I'm out on a walk
Yeah.
because I'm already gonna like thinking. I'm already just like, letting my brain just relax kind of thing.
Yes.
And so sometimes that can be really effective too. Right. I mean,
Absolutely.
you got to find what works for you. But the idea is it really just works on that unconscious level and people don't need to be afraid of it. I mean, if you're getting them from reputable sources and, you vet the person and, do your homework on it, there's nothing bad that's going to happen from this,
Yes.
literally.
Yes. And so I'm thinking about, as we're talking, thinking about our skeptics that might be listening, but I want to explain because I've seen this happen for myself. I've seen this happen with other business owners. Like so how does like laying in bed, listening to hypnosis, how am I going to make more money? What does that mean for my business? And the way I see it is, because especially in terms of pricing, and with some of our clients in Swift Galleries, I've had conversations and I see it happen so much. We've talked about this several times already, but this idea that I can't charge enough. And it really stems down to it's what we believe about ourselves. We don't
Yeah.
want to charge, and we don't charge enough because we don't think we're valuable.
Yeah.
So that a lot of times is the core. So when we're doing stuff like this hypnosis and we're breaking down like, these unconscious beliefs that we have that we're not valuable, as we take away those blocks, those barriers fall down, then this idea of, oh, I'm going to actually charge enough to make a living, you're not going to be fighting it yourself. And then
Yeah.
you actually will take that step to charge more, charge what you're worth. Your business is going to grow. And that's how I see it. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I
Because
do.
there is absolutely a line there between hypnosis to having a good, successful
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, 100%. Again, when you're regulating your nervous system in a lot of ways, right? It's like, so when you get out
Yes.
of fight or flight, a lot of people don't realize that they live in fight, flight, or freeze, especially after the last couple of years, right? It's done a
Yeah.
number
Yeah.
on so many people. I mean, I was just talking to someone a couple of days ago who said that she's like, I've never had social anxiety, but I do now, and I don't want to be in public. And
Yeah.
it's a very big issue that I think we're going to continue to see. And so when you're not living in fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, that's the fourth one,
The-
in that response, you are able to open up to your entire potential, and we are so much more. We are so much more than we allow ourselves to be. I mean,
yes.
I will get a little woo probably on this conversation, but
No, go for it.
I really do believe that is true. I think that most people don't inherently believe that anything that they want is available to them. We've been taught not to believe that. We've been taught
Yes.
that we have to hustle and we have to work and we have to grind and we have to, figure out all these things and overthink our way through it. But it's really the opposite. The less you do of all that stuff, really, it's when you open up to those possibilities, when you
Yes.
follow your light, right? Like what lights you up, listening to yourself and to your higher self and to, those ideas that come in and following that, leaning into that instead of like, being afraid, because really what
Yes.
that really translates to is just all fear. It's just all
It
fear.
is.
It's it. And it's all fear traced back to I'm going to die. Literally, you can trace all of that
Mhm.
back to this isn't safe, right? Well, if you can rewire your brain, and you can, but if you can regulate your nervous system and rewire your brain into believing that you are safe in this place,
Yes.
you're unstoppable, like literally, because you can do anything you decide. Like you are now in the driver's seat, right? And you're not just kind of like letting life take you where it's going to take you.
Yeah.
You're stepping more into, you know, control, but that's not the right word because we don't really have a lot of control. But we do have control over the way that we think and we feel. And
Yes.
we can regulate that. And that does translate into more money. I see it happen all the time because a lot of people, like you said, most people just don't believe that they're worthy. That is a lot. That is a big one. That was definitely one of
Mm-hmm.
my triggers, is the
Yeah.
worthiness. And I didn't even realize I had that
Mm-hmm.
until I started looking at it. And I was like, where is this coming from? Like, why is this so hard? And I had to go do some deep work. And
Yes,
it took me to a place where
absolutely.
I was like, wow, that's really odd. I would never have like consciously put that together. That's where it came from. But now that I know, I don't need that anymore. You're dismissed. I don't need that thought anymore.
Yes.
And so the more you do it, it's not like an overnight thing too. Like a lot is,
Yeah.
it's not quick fix, but it's a journey, and it's a journey of your own self-discovery. So, your only limit is yourself. That really is true. You can
Yeah.
go as far as you want to go with this. But yes, I see it translate to money all the time. All the time. It just
Yeah.
depends on what your particular trigger is, where it's coming from, and what you want to do about it. And how can we come up with the
Yes.
right strategy for you to let that go? Because, like, do you really want to keep carrying that?
Yeah. No, I don't. Yeah, I'm all inspired. I love it. I love it. Well, so I have a few questions, a few more just sort of fun questions at the end. But before that, and you've talked about your coaching throughout our conversation, but I would love to know just a little more specifics. What does that look like? If a photographer is listening and they're like, this is what I need, how can they sign up for you? Do you just do one-on-one? What options do you have?
Yeah, I have a lot of options. I do have like some smaller, first of all, I have a lot of freebies on my coaching site too. So that's
Awesome.
a good place to start. Like there's probably 6 or 7 at this point,
Okay.
all different topics, and so that's a good place to kind of start and see like
Okay.
what you need the most help with. And I do offer, smaller courses as well. So, you can kind of see all of that at the ReneeBowenCoaching.com
Yes.
slash
And we will
store.
put a link. We will slash what?
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Store.
interrupted.
Yeah.
Store.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we will put a link to your site
Okay.
on
Yeah. So
here. So
they
yeah,
can kind of
anyone
check it out
listening, you
there.
can come find it.
And then as far as the coaching goes, I do offer a couple of different options. I work with creatives as well as photographers specifically
Yes.
too. So it kind of depends. So I have a very, very in-depth, deep dive senior photography on like an online course, but it's paired with coaching. And so that's what makes it really
That's
different.
awesome.
It's
Yes.
everything that you could possibly ever want to know: how to run, start, revise a senior business.
Yeah.
All the templates, everything I've ever created is in that. And it includes 4 months of coaching with me. So that's really kind of what makes that difference. I like to run it either as a small group, like 5 or under, but I do one-on-ones with that as well. So it just
Yes.
depends on what works best for the person. And so that's really like a signature offer that I do. I've been focusing on that since 2019. I am going to be revising it going into next year as far as just tightening it up. It'll still be
Mm-hmm.
available, but I'm going to add that, like, you can add coaching on. So it'll be a little bit
Okay.
scaled back. So it'll be like a course that people can just buy, but then you can add coaching
Add
if
the
you like
coaching.
it.
Okay.
But then I also do one-on-one coaching as well, just straight off,
Awesome.
either 3-month or 6-month. I don't do like one-offs usually, because I feel like
Okay.
it's not usually the
You
impact
need to get
that is
into a
needed.
rhythm. Yeah.
It needs to be like at least a 3-month commitment.
Yes.
So yeah.
Absolutely. That totally makes sense. And I was just thinking about, this is kind of jumping around because I just remember we never really talked about the NLP that much. And so do you use that, like when you're coaching, do you use that to help teach people marketing, like how to teach
Mhm.
them to the language to use?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, there's a
it's
whole,
awesome.
yeah. So we usually, I use NLP just all the time in my own
Uh-huh.
coaching, because again, it's about asking really good questions. And so
Yes.
it's part of how I was trained as a life coach. But it's funny because when I went through the training, I was like, I've been doing this. I've been doing this.
Doing it
So I've just
already.
kind of did it already. I don't know. It's probably because I listened to so much Tony Robbins. I don't know. I was obsessed with him for a while. So I think that I was already like naturally kind of geared for it. And then I learned how to use it strategically as a coach.
Yes.
But yes, I do teach photographers and creatives specifically on how to use NLP tactics, so to speak,
Yes.
and words
Okay.
and phrases in their pricing, in the way that because there's a psychology of pricing, as you know, right?
Yes.
Like, so
Yes.
it's how you present it. It's how, like, what's the body language during the IPS? Like it's a lot of details. So yeah, it's all in there.
That's awesome. Yes, I
Yeah.
can see Swift users like loving that. It sounds so good.
It's important.
It is very important. And so you've talked about Tony Robbins, and this is one of my questions is like, I'll let you pick someone else. Is there someone else, like either a podcast or a book, author, speaker that right now, like outside the photography industry that you just love and love to like follow and learn from?
Okay, there's so many. That's like
Okay.
such a hard question for me because I am
You
like,
can say a couple.
I probably will. I'm really such a podcast junkie in particular.
Okay.
Like, I'm just one of those people, like I kind of always have podcasts on.
Yeah.
And so in that respect, I feel like I'm always kind of jumping around. I mean, I love Brendan Bouchard. I listen to him. I think that he's a really great coach. And
Awesome.
he gives you really quick tidbits. So I like him for those types of things. I do tend to listen to a lot of business stuff as well, like marketing in general. So, Amy Porterfield's always been one of my faves. It just kind of depends on and pricing and things like that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm drawing a blank right now on some of the other ones that I've
Oh,
been
that's
listening
okay.
to lately.
Those are great. Yeah.
I listened to a really great book, an Audible book. Oh gosh, what is his name? Chris. I can't remember his last name right now, but I finished listening to it a couple months ago. He was a former FBI negotiator, and it's all about the art of negotiation.
Interesting.
And that is really interesting in terms of business. Like if you think about it in terms of like, because everything's a negotiation.
Yeah.
And so I'm always kind of like geeking out about stuff like that. And I love Dr. Amen, Amen. He's the founder of Amen Clinics. And I have a certification in his brain training. He's the one who he developed and invented basically all of those thermal brain images that you see, like the SPECT scans. Okay. And his work is really fascinating. And of course, Mel Robbins. I love Mel Robbins. So that would be my list.
Awesome. That's a great list. That's a great list. I will have to look into.
There's so many more.
Yes. No, I love it. And I love hearing new people to follow. So the FBI negotiator, I will look that up.
I'm going to find his last name.
Put that in the notes.
Yeah,
we'll see if we can find it.
I'll email you after because I have it in my Audible. It's very fun to listen to as well because he tells stories of actual things that he had to negotiate, like life and death situations.
Yes.
And then he teaches you how to like put this into perspective as a business owner, entrepreneur. And it's really cool. Yeah.
Yes. Now with Mel Robbins, do you high five yourself?
Yeah, it's really funny because my husband and I have been doing that probably 15 years. Like,
oh, you have?
So
How
funny.
Cool. And then she just came out with this book about it. And so
I was like, oh my God, like this is totally like what we've kind of been doing. And because my husband's really big into all of that too, obviously.
Yes.
And it's just, again, it's like finding those strategies that work for you. And I love that like so many more people know she's amazing. Like just, I think a lot of us, and Jen Sincero is another one that I love. A lot of us, we, especially in the personal development world, whatever, you're kind of saying the same thing, right? It's all kind of about the same thing, but it's who you hear it from, right? And how it's delivered. Yes. And so that's what matters. It's like, and that's a really good example too of not letting that stop you, right? So like if Mel Robbins would have stopped, like, oh, people probably already do this, or people probably already know about these things, like she wouldn't be who she is, right? And so same thing with Jen Sincero. It's like your message matters because some people are just going to hear it better from you than someone else. And so you've got to be out there talking.
Yes. And that's, I mean, in terms of, we can even pivot that in terms of like the photography business where I see so many people, they're like, oh, there's already this many people in my market. It's overcrowded. No one's going to book me, but they need you. There are people out there that are looking for what you have, not what Jane down the street has. And it's that individuality. Like there's going to be something about you that's going to speak to them and they're going to want to hire you. So I think, exactly what you just said. And even with this coaching, we hear these strategies from different people. Cause I never heard about high-fiving yourself in the mirror until and I think I first heard Mel Robbins talk about it on a podcast. And then I started listening to her book. And I was like, this is amazing. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's in the morning, she goes, she looks at herself, she gives herself a high five in the mirror. A lot of it is just that, when you high five someone, you're just encouraging them. There's something in that motion that kind of motivates you. And so rather than waiting for someone else to give you a high five, you just do it for yourself in the mirror. And it can really.
She's also been talking for years. Her other book, was the 5-second rule.
Yes.
Amazing. It's the same kind of thing. And it's a really great anti-anxiety strategy because she really talks openly about dealing with so much depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And so many people can understand that. Like, she has dread every single morning from trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what she developed for herself to get herself out of bed.
Yes.
And said, well, this probably could help some other people. So yeah, it's the same thing, like with photography. And I hear that from photographers all the time too, right? Like, well, there's so many people in my market. So they're not talking to your target client.
No,
they're not you.
They're not you. Exactly. Yes. Yes. I love that. I love it. So I've got 2 more questions. One will be, what do you like to do for fun? Outside of business, outside of coaching, do you have a hobby that's not photography or just any type of book you like to read?
I do listen to books. I haven't read a physical book in a while. I have to admit that.
Yeah, it's okay.
I do love to read,
still reading,
but I like to listen to them because I can multitask. So I wouldn't necessarily count that necessarily as something super fun, although it is fun. I love to travel. I think that's probably going to be like my number one thing now that all my kids are grown, and it's kind of fun to be able to go and pick up and leave. It's pretty awesome.
And what's your favorite place to visit?
Well, so far, I would have to probably say, of all the places I've been, probably Japan. Like,
awesome.
you could just like drop me in Japan. I would be fine. Just leave me there.
It.
Like, I didn't think that I was going to have that experience with it. Like, it was just I've been really fortunate that I travel with a family and shoot their family photos on their amazing vacations.
Oh,
and
awesome.
So Japan was one of the places that we went for 2 weeks with a family that I travel with. And so I was working, but I had a lot of downtime as well. It's such an amazing place. But my daughter and I are going to Paris next month to celebrate her graduation.
Okay.
And this will be the 3rd time I think I've been to Paris, because I went with the family that I once and then on my own. And so celebrating her college graduation and my birthday. And so it's just gonna be us girls for a few days. So I would say travel is probably right up there and like my favorite thing to do. Yes. And other than that, watching movies on the couch with my husband. It's pretty simple.
Well, it was so good chatting with you today, Renee. And
you too.
Man, I learned a lot from you, and I'm excited to check out everything that you've talked about and check out your hypnosis tracks. I need to see about that. So, and
let me know what you think.
Absolutely. So it was good talking to you, and I will hopefully get to talk with you again, and can't wait to hear when your new podcast comes out too.
Yes. I'll let you guys know. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
You're welcome. Yes. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.